So I got invited to participate in the Zwift Games, which is one of the biggest virtual bike racing competitions in the world, over $100,000 on the line. And I was super excited, and then I got really sick just a couple weeks before the event, losing all my fitness. And on top of that, the truth is, virtual racing is just a completely different craft than the in real life racing that I'm used to. And I'm just not that good at it. So fortunately, I have on today somebody who is very good at virtual racing, who's going to help us all become better Zwift racers, and that is Brian Duffy. Welcome to the channel, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Excited to talk through the race.
Yeah, dude, U.S. national champ of esports. What's the official title?
Oh man, it's a confusing one. So for US, it was the USA Cycling. Last year was the first time it was sanctioned by USA Cycling. But yeah, USA Cycling. I think esports cycling national champion.
That's amazing. I would love me some stars and stripes. And I learned very quickly that Zwifting is like its own thing. Like I thought, hey, I ride outside a lot. I do a lot of crit racing. I'm good. We're locked in. I'm going to be competitive. But like you said, public racing that you can just join is a different animal than what we're seeing here, which is, like I said, this is stage one of the Zwift Games. A couple of things is just sitting in the pack right here. Like, look at the amount of power you're doing just sitting in. This was unexpected for me. Is this normal Zwift racing at this level?
Yeah, it depends what you define as normal, but certainly for these high level races where you have to go through a lot of verification with your equipment, with your physiological tests, weigh-ins, etc. It just selects a really high caliber level of rider and athlete. So the pace always just tends to be really, really hot. Riders are a little bit nervous. They're tapered. They're ready to give it everything. So even if the course is flat, just the pace is always really high, even when you're just sitting in the pack.
Yeah, 100%. I think I did like FTP power, which for me was like, I think 345, 350 watts for the first 12 minutes of this race. Didn't last long for me, but I was expecting, like, this is a flat course. You guys can see the profile in the upper right there. I was like, look, I can sit in and I can ride at zone 2, maybe a little bit of zone 3, like it's a normal in real life outside race. Zwift, it's different. Like, I don't know, is the drafting algorithm is different or something like that, because in real life, if it's a flat course like this and I'm doing 350 mid pack, somebody on the front is doing like 600, 700 watts, which is unsustainable, right?
Yeah.
Do you do outside racing or outside riding?
Before I hit on that, just like a quick one. So I'm a bit of a COVID Zwifter. I mean, I had used Zwift as a training platform for many years, probably since 2016, but I started racing 2020 like many others. But even since then, over the last 5 years, the sport has evolved a lot. So it used to be the case that you would have these pure power sprinters who would just sit in the entire race and then unleash a huge sprint at the end and win. But the racing has just gotten so hard, even on flat races like this one, where just sitting in the pack, you're putting out, near threshold levels, that it's really changed the dynamic of the race. You're often just a lot more tired going into the final sprint, if there is a final bunch sprint, that it just requires a different power profile to be successful. So it's really interesting to see who's kind of thrived over the last few years and who's kind of fallen back, just based on how the dynamics of the racing has changed. As far as your question on, do I ride outside? Very little. I was actually a triathlete for 15 years and raced really competitively on that circuit. And then since 2020 have pretty much exclusively just been cycling, kind of cut out the running and the swimming. So it's been fun for me because I used to just be like steady state threshold training, and I've went through this bit of a morphed my physiology to be much more better tailored toward like a lot of VO2 max, like punchy kind of efforts in cycling. But for the most part, riding indoors. I'll occasionally do some outdoor crits and things like that.
Do you how's your training? What's that like? Is it tailored for Zwift racing? Like, because this is different, right? This is like a 25-minute race. There's no such thing as a 25-minute crit. The shortest racing that I do is an hour. It's like an hour-long crit, and it only goes up from there. I found that everybody is like on this different level. Like, they're able to unload all the watts in 25 minutes, stay at 320 watts like you're doing now, a bit more for me because I'm a little heavier, and then still be able to do those big efforts over threshold. Do you train specifically for this type of effort?
Yeah, it's a bit of a misconception. There's certainly correlation between Zwift or indoor riding and outdoor riding, but it's not as high as a lot of people might want to think. So you have a lot of people who come outdoors, from outdoors, get dropped, and they kind of think it's all bogus because they got dropped. But it's a different craft. There's certainly a lot of overlap, but it's a different craft. It's different duration, as you mentioned. It's a different requires different energy systems, different style of riding. Like aerodynamics don't matter, that's for sure. It's just pure power.
Yeah, you're
Um,
out of the saddle. I can see your little
I'm
your little camera there in the bottom
I'm
left, and that's one thing too.
yeah,
Is
I'm out
you
of
know,
the saddle. Yeah, I'm out of the saddle a lot, and I'm lower cadence, and that's been a bit of a. I remember I was one of the early like early riders
adopters.
like that. Yeah, early adopters of that style. And it wasn't really intentional. It just kind of naturally occurred. Like your body has an interesting way of just finding what's the optimal way to generate power for a sustained period of time. And my body just naturally gravitated toward the resistance that lower cadence provides, and that out of this you have to have really strong legs. Like some people just can't do it, but if you keep working at it and training at it, like you'll be able to handle it, and it probably is more optimal because you're just able to generate a little bit more power
Yeah.
if you can hold up. Now, it's not well suited if it's a really long race, so that's why it is okay for Zwift racing, because if it's a 25-30 minute race, that duration, it might be more manageable.
Yeah, totally. It's funny that you mentioned that. I remember the first couple of Zwift races I did, and maybe even still, just like muscle memory kicks in, and when things get fast, I like lower my front end and lower myself on the bike, just because like that's what I've done for the last 15 years. Is when things get hard, I get more aerodynamic on the front, and I think it takes a while. You have to be conscious about like, well, no, what's the most optimal power that you can make? Like, what position is that? Because obviously in Zwift, doesn't matter if you're just out of the saddle. You've been out of the saddle for like this whole time we've been talking, because that's the most efficient position where you're making the most power. Now,
Yeah.
you did some outside riding? You did triathlon. Do you have to do the same amount of volume to stay competitive in Zwift as you did like triathlon or crits or
No,
road racing?
no, definitely not. So, yeah, it's some of my teammates joke. I'm probably not like the best person to ask about training. So when I was a triathlete, I was very structured, had a coach plan, followed a prescriptive plan for many years. When I started Zwift racing, I was like, all right, I just want a little bit more flexibility. I want freedom. I want to have fun first and foremost. But like a lot of type A athletes, fun means doing well, and doing well requires putting in work. But the work that I've primarily done, yeah, it's well suited for Zwift, but it's a little unorthodox in the sense that I don't do a lot of interval training or like planned and structured training. I mainly race my way into shape. So, there's a Zwift race that you can jump into pretty much every day of the week. So I'll basically just do a few Zwift races each week, and then on the other days I'll do like easy rides.
Do you
But
think
through
though somebody getting into the sport, like you have this long history of
Yeah,
endurance training, triathlon, all that
yeah,
for years and years. Somebody who's just getting in, who's listening to this and is like, I want to try Zwift racing. I'm kind of new to cycling in general.
yeah.
Would you say like do structure, do racing, a mixture of both? Like, what do you think the optimal plan would be?
I think it's definitely a mixture of everything. I mean, I primarily race, but when I'm racing, I mix it up by like what are different strategies or different energy systems that I want to activate during that race. So sometimes I'll just like go off the front and try to do a long breakaway. Other times I'll sit in and do a sprint. Other times I'll just like repeatedly attack. I don't care as much about my place in like just these smaller sub tier races. I kind of just use it as a proxy for training. But absolutely mixing it up, I think, just works different energy systems and get different stimulation. And it kind of depends on the person. It's just like what motivates you. Do you want to have like, you know, intervals set up and you're just kind of checking off each interval and doing it that way? Do you like the little bit more free form approach by racing as a proxy for interval training? Certainly you have to do racing. It has to be a part just because there's so much art and craft involved in it. If you only trained as you would for like outdoor riding, there's just differences both
Yeah.
in the craft as well as in the riding style that will probably set you back a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. I tell people all the time, you can be as fit as a fiddle and go out and race a crit and still get dropped and be stronger than everybody, like objectively stronger than everybody, make more power but still get dropped. if you don't understand the dynamic of riding in a group, of knowing what you're capable of. To your point, like go out and lose, do something that you don't normally do just to find out what that's like. Maybe you are a climber, maybe you are a breakaway specialist, and you think you're a sprinter, or vice versa. So with that in mind, my next question is like, what's the pack dynamic like in Zwift racing? And as somebody who's done a little bit of both, mostly as of late Zwift racing, like how is it different? Because I'll tell you my experience, but I want to hear yours first. Like surfing the pack, you do seem to do such a good job at just staying in the draft, and like tell me how to do that because I need to learn.
Yeah, well, so to one of your earlier questions, yeah, I don't know exactly like the whole Zwift algorithm, but yeah, it's probably a little bit less generous than what you would get outside. Yeah, maybe if you're just behind one person, it's a little bit more approximate to outdoors, but certainly if you're in a pack behind like 30, like I am right now, you're probably getting a little bit more outdoors than you are getting in here. That being said, each like trading platform or each racing platform is a little bit different. Some of the other platforms have even less draft benefit. But I would say Zwift pack riding, it's really all about anticipation, and you get that a little bit intuitively just by riding a lot. So to stay like centrally located in the pack, a little bit like I'm doing right now, it's you don't want to be necessarily reacting to what is happening around you. You have to like anticipate where other riders are going or where you're going to be. So you're kind of just governing your effort because there's a little bit of a lag,
Yeah.
just like it would be outdoors. If
So
you start accelerating, it's going to take a few seconds for that to really manifest itself. So you just have to be a few seconds ahead.
is there a difference? The serious question. I actually don't know. If you are like third wheel in this group, as opposed to like 53rd wheel, is there a drafting benefit to being like behind a bunch more riders, or is
Y-
it the same as
y-
just being behind two riders?
No, there's definitely a benefit. I don't know where it like tailors off, but I do a lot of team time trials with my team, and there usually have riders of six or a team of six or maybe eight, and we'll have a pace line and kind of rotate it off every 30 seconds or so. But when you're second wheel behind the leader, yeah, you're getting a lot less draft than when you're sixth wheel. So certainly second to sixth makes a pretty meaningful difference. But I don't know if it like continues on a linear fashion all the way out to
Right.
50th. I think it kind of drops off at some point.
Sure, like in real life. I think they've done a good job. I think
Yeah.
Zwift's done a good job. I remember being frustrated early on. Part of that is probably because I was just even worse at Zwift racing, but also I think they've done a good job in getting it closer to like your intuition, like what you expect. Like being behind 30 riders, you're gonna get a better benefit, than being behind two
Exactly.
riders.
Yep.
I wouldn't call it like real life, but it's getting closer.
It's definitely getting closer, and they're iterating. I don't know how many different pack dynamics they've done now. They'll do some beta testing, get some feedback. So yeah, they try to make it closer and closer. Obviously, what you don't have to really account for is like riding a round of riders. You can, for the most part, just go through them. They have adjusted that even a little bit. It can be you sometimes have to do a little bit more effort to get through a bunch as opposed to just riding through them easily. But they're playing around with steering. So I have Zwift Play, which allows you to steer left and right. They're disabled in races like these just because
Right.
not everybody has them and want to keep it a level playing field. But it's pretty interesting to see where they're trying to take the sport.
So, we're now entering the downhill section of this course. By the way, I'll flash some footage of me on the screen now. I was gasping for air. I was looking forward to this little downhill, and you're still not able. This is again another difference between in real life racing. This is like I don't know what this average is. This downhill maybe -3%. So in real life, if you're going down 3%, especially at these types of speeds, I am coasting, or maybe doing 200 watts for a couple seconds and then going back to coasting. But I was still on the power in Zwiftland, and I was like, oh man, I really needed to recover in this moment. You're drifting towards the back. Is this intentional? Like, what's your plan on the downhill? We're approaching sprint points, and quite frankly, we're approaching the end of this race. Like, what are you thinking right now?
Definitely trying to get recovery, and recovery in downhills has been made a little bit more difficult due to some of the pack dynamics. It used to be a case where in the game you can super tuck if you're on a certain gradient and over a certain speed, but now only if you're the leader. It used to be the case that everybody could super tuck, and they changed that for I think for a variety of different reasons. But as a result, you have to keep pace a little bit on the downhills. You have to pay attention because people can slip away. So I'm trying to get as much recovery here as I can, obviously, because it is a little bit easier going downhill. but also just paying attention to make sure that you're not drifting too far back, that you're staying in the middle of the pack. Sometimes people use downhills as opportunities to try to break away just because it's the least expected. So you just have to be alert.
Yeah, and we have sprint points coming up. Let's quickly talk about the structure of this race of these races. Uh, there are what's in nine? No, 8 stages in total, including some bonus stages. Well, we're going to talk about each stage. The point is, this isn't the end of Zwift games. This is just stage 1, and the points are cumulative. So there are 10 points on the line for the first person to cross at these intermediate points. It doesn't look like you're going for it based on your position right now, but correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct. Yeah. I made a decision before the race that I was not going to go for the intermediate. It just, the risk reward wasn't quite there for me, probably for a lot of riders. I think it's at the end of the day, it's a points race. So this is the sprint championship. There's two races, and each they reward you with points depending on how you do the intermediate sprint and the finish line. And then the five riders with the most points after the 2 races go to the finale. So as I looked at the point distribution, the intermediate sprint only rewards the top 3, like 10, 5, 3 or something to that effect. So getting third out of a field of 75, not all 75 are going to go for it, but still you have to put out a lot of effort, and you might get some points.
You don't want to get fourth and waste all the energy, right?
You don't want to get fourth. It's close to the finish line. How far out are we? Like 2 miles. Close to the finish line, so it's going to be an effort. But then the finish line, if you get first, it's like 70 points. So it's just the distribution wasn't quite there for me. Now, I knew others were going to go for it, so the pace is just going to accelerate. So I was preparing to, put out a pretty decent effort just to make sure I'm staying connected to the pack, but I was not going for the win there.
Yeah. Thanks, by the way, for saving me on the description of how the points work. You were much more eloquent than I was in describing how that works. But yeah, at this point in the race, I was like, didn't get the recovery I needed, and I'm already struggling here. And we're approaching really the defining feature of the first stage of Zwift games, which is this, what is it, 1 minute climb? Maybe it's like not much, but I know people are going to go absolutely thermonuclear up this little climb. Tell me about your positioning when it comes to these features, like a little climb like this, because for me in real life racing, I would, as a sprinter, I would try to position myself near the front at the bottom so I can kind of sag the climb and finish towards the back, but remain in the draft. Is that your approach, or tell me what's the best way to approach it in Zwift?
Yeah, I think during the climb, I mean, I'm a little bit farther back now, but I usually do that because I try to, like, as you head into the climb, be a little bit behind, accelerate as the climb's about to start, and you'll get a nice momentum effect. This game's a lot about momentum, just like it is outside, and you can use momentum to your advantage. But then during the climb itself, so I think I'll be moving up here because after this bridge is when the climb more properly starts. But then once you get on the climb, I want it to be probably like top third. I knew the pace was going to be high. There's a chance that somebody could try to really push it and accelerate. So I just wanted to be able to see the action in case I had to go with a move. So yeah, I'm putting out decent more power. I have a good sense of where everybody's at. I can see nobody's going off the front. I feel like I'm well positioned right now. I don't need to be on the front, but I want to be close to it.
And you have an earpiece in, and you are in communication with your teammates throughout all of this. Like, this is serious racing, guys. There's $100,000 on the line. I want you to give people an understanding of, like, you guys are organized. You're on a team. Tell me about that dynamic.
So actually, this quick call right here. So I've done this before. On the top of this is the top of the hill. This is a common spot for people to try to break away. I've done it. It's like people expect on the uphill to go hard, but then once you get to the top, people slow down, and that's a natural spot where someone then tries to catch people by surprise and attack.
And there you go.
And on this downhill is where a couple teammates actually coordinate it, make a break, and go for it. So I was anticipating that was likely the case. I was keeping an eye on it. I kind of already made the decision that, again, it wasn't probably worth it for me to go with that because it's 2 races here. If this is only 1 race, then that kind of make or break decision would probably make sense to potentially go with it and try to get the win. But it's going to take a lot more effort. And we've got to race again, in a half hour after this. So I liked my chances better to conserve energy, go for the sprint. It's a points race. If I didn't win, but I got top 5 or top 10, that would be good because I would still have the legs to then do it again in the next race. So you have to think about those calculations a little bit. But yes, we are working as a team. We have a lot of communication to people are spotting who's breaking away, where we need to work together. So it's really helpful.
You have a DS in your ear. You have a whole squad. But as we're talking about this, you opened up your sprint earlier than I expected. Is that a normal distance to go? That was like easily 300 meters.
Yes, this sprint was coming off of a downhill, then flats. I knew it was going to be fast. What I do right here is I start toward the back, but then you want to be accelerating through. I don't want to open up my sprint just yet. I want to allow my momentum to carry me through the peloton before I'm 100% committed. I wait till everybody else kind of drops their power, and then when I put my head down, that's when I'm 100% committed. So I've already allowed my avatar to gain a lot of momentum to go through the pack by the time I'm then heads down all out. And because you don't want to go to the front too quickly where you'll take on all the theoretical wind, the virtual wind. But you want to be using that momentum. If you just try to start the sprint when your avatar is moving at the exact same velocity as the rest of the pack, it's easier to get enough differentiation to move up. So I was thoughtfully, ensuring that I had momentum at my advantage by the time I was actually opening up my sprint, and it worked out pretty well there. I think I got fifth or so. A couple that went for an early break, I think, held on, and then a couple others to kind of beat me there at the very end on the sprint line.
Yeah, it looked like your timing was pretty spot on. There was one guy that maybe waited a second longer and was able to come over the top. But awesome, well done, man. I mean, you guys, like, what's the watts per kilogram that you averaged in this first stage? I want people to understand like how difficult, how high level this racing is. It's wild.
Yeah, actually, I actually don't know. I can't remember what my average was, but yeah, it was probably in the high fours. I'm guessing on average, maybe close to five. So yeah, it's a pretty sustained effort. There's not a lot of lulls, and this was a flat course. I mean, this is the sprint championship, so this course is about as easy as it gets. When you start getting into courses that feature climbs, your overall average is going to go up, but certainly the hard parts get harder. And recovery is being able to go hard multiple times while also not having like a true recovery in between. I think that's what catches a lot of people off guard. They expect hard efforts, but then they expect a lot of downtime and lulls to allow them to recover. That doesn't happen. It's like hard and then back to threshold, and then hard and then back to threshold.
Cool. Well, hey, it was great having you on, Brian. I really appreciate your insight, man. And I think we're going to talk through the second race too, if you're interested. I want to hear your full experience in the first weekend of the Zwift game, stages 1, 2, and well, maybe 3 if you made the top 5. Thanks for coming on. If you guys want more Zwift content from Brian and want to learn about stage 2, get subscribed. We'll see you in the next one.